In today's video, we're going to be going over 10 watches that I would love to buy right now. We're covering new watches, vintage watches, classic watches, and I think the ones at the end are gonna surprise you, I think. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always, and before we start, if you could hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it, guys. All your support literally means the world, and it will come as no surprise what number one is, because it's new and it's a Seamaster. This is the brand new Seamaster Diver 300 bronze gold with the rubber strap. Omega dropped this around about 2 weeks ago from when this video will actually be released, and there's so many things that I absolutely adore about this watch. Most of all is the fact that they've actually used an aluminium bezel insert. Now this is the same kind of vibe that we see from the Tudor Black Bay, and it gives it so much more of a refined tool watch look to me. It looks a lot more matte, the bezel looks a lot more matte, and I just love the way that burgundy kind of color, that red kind of color plays against that bronze gold. It's just perfectly matched. This watch has pretty much the classic specs that we know from the Seamaster. It comes in at 42 millimeters in diameter, 13.8 millimeters in thickness, so it is a damn thick boy, and has a 49.7 millimeter lug to lug. So the bronze gold element to this is actually quite fun. It gives it a really distinctive hue, and that's because of the components that are in bronze gold. So it's actually made up of 50% copper and about 37.5% pure gold. Now the price of this watch on the rubber strap, which is definitely what I prefer, is £13,100. And a lot of people were kind of shocked by that. They were kind of up in arms about that price. But when you compare it to something else in the Omega range, it actually doesn't seem that bad. This is the Omega Seamaster Diver Sedina Gold on a rubber strap, and it comes in at £27,700. And when you compare them, they're both on the rubber strap. I don't understand where that massive price jump's coming from. Like, I know it'll have more gold in it, but does it justify that price? I don't know. The movement in this watch is the Omega Caliber 8806, which is fully self-winding movement, Coskin Metas certified, and has 55 hours of power. Essentially, it's the same movement that's in the Omega Seamaster date, 300 meters, but without the date complication. I just feel like the dark dial combined with that bronze gold, combined with that burgundy strap, adds a hell of a lot to this watch. It seriously does. And I would always go for the rubber when it comes to precious metals, because I'd be scared to damage that precious metal. So that's why I've gone with the rubber here. Now remember that although I'm saying I'd love to buy these watches, it doesn't necessarily mean that I will buy these watches, because I absolutely do not have 13 grand in the account. Next up, we have the Christopher Ward 12 38 millimeters. Originally released in the 40 millimeters. I have this watch. I have it. Let me get it so that I can, yeah. This is the watch right here, the 40 millimeter Christopher Ward 12. Now, it's a watch that I actually got from Christopher Ward, and I really did like it. To be honest, it kind of replaced the wrist time of my Tissot PRX. However, I do think the 38 millimeter sizing would just be better. To top that off, this watch has had a lot of bracelet problems, and I've documented this in the past in previous videos, but from what I've heard from the Christopher Ward team and from also the social space in the watch community, apparently they're honing in on that bracelet and making it that little bit more durable. Now, there was no big problems, but it's just screws kept coming loose and the bracelet kept kind of popping off. But overall, this watch is an incredible package. So let's look at the 38 millimeter specs. This watch comes in at 38 millimeters in diameter, 9.95 millimeters in height, and 43.3 millimeters lug to lug. There's a ton of different colors that you can get. There's a dark blue, a glacier blue, which I'm kind of a fan of. There's this yellow that they've called Midnight Sun, and it's not for me, but it might be for you. And then you have a silver dial as well. The movement in this watch is the Sellita SW200. It's fully automatic and has 38 hours of power. Yes, it's nothing to write home about, but mass-produced movements aren't necessarily a bad thing. Like, BMW cars aren't bad because they're mass-produced. They're tried and tested, and everyone loves them. I just feel like the 38 millimeter Christopher Ward 12 is a testament to Christopher Ward listening to the community. And they're one of the few watch brands that's still nimble and small enough to essentially listen to the community and release things based on that. When it gets to the massive conglomerates, the massive brands like Omega, Rolex, Vacheron Constantin, etc., they normally plan their production 2, 3, 4 years in advance. So they don't really listen to the community as much as brands like Christopher Ward. And that's why I like this watch so much. It comes in at £1,050. Next on the list, we have another brand that I'll never be able to afford. We'll never say never. Maybe in like 50 years, if Bitcoin goes like this. But this is the Vacheron Constantin 222, the new blue dial. The Vacheron 222 comes in at 37 millimeters in diameter, 7.95 millimeters in thickness, is water resistant to 50 meters, has a blue dial, and comes in full stainless steel. It also has a beautiful handcrafted movement, the reference 2455/2. It's fully self-winding, being automatic, and has 40 hours of power. Now, originally I actually had down an overseas model to get, and I kind of went back on that. And the reason I went back on that is I have a lot of travel-y watches in my collection already. I have a lot of things that I would like to take overseas, but I don't have as many high-end dress watches. And I think this is the pinnacle of high-end dress watches. Plus, it's part of the Holy Trinity. Plus, it's packed full of history. It's just an awesome watch with a not so awesome price point. It comes in at £30,000, £30,800. So maybe if I sell my flat studio cameras, all my watches, I'll afford half of that. Next on the list, we have the Rolex Yachtmaster. Yes, you heard me. Harrison talking about a Rolex is almost unheard of, but I do love this watch. And actually, I've loved this watch for a while. It was between this and the Daytona stainless steel bezel. And honestly, I think that I would get this first. It's more understated from Rolex. I think it's less common than the Daytona or the Submariner, but it still screams Rolex and class. This watch comes in at 40 millimeters in diameter and comes in oyster steel and platinum. It's waterproof to 100 meters and has a beautiful self-winding 3235 Rolex movement, which is accurate to -2 to +2 seconds per day and has 70 hours of power. Now, the blue hand on this, the light blue hand against that gray dial and the silver looking bezel is just stunning. It's absolutely jaw-dropping. Now, I won't dwell on this too much. That's part of the thing about Rolex. Everybody's talked about it, so I know you guys have probably heard this before, but yeah. Not a Rolex fanboy, but I like them. The next watch on the list is a Panerai, and it's not the Luna Rosa that I always talk about, and I'll give you my reasoning behind that after I've told you the model, because I probably need to do that. This is the Panerai This is the Panerai Submersible Quattro with the white dial and green rubber strap, coming in at 44 millimeters in diameter. Now, let me explain why I went for this one in particular. I feel like Panerai is one of the last remaining brands that goes against the grain when it comes to size. Every brand in the industry, everybody knows this, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because we, as the watch enthusiasts, want smaller and smaller watches. Christopher Ward here is a perfect example of that. But Panerai is one of the only brands that kind of suits being bigger. It doesn't really look like a Panerai unless it's big, it's chunky, it's bold. And there is part of me that really likes that. This watch is water resistant to 300 meters and has that iconic, and I repeat, iconic safety latch on the right hand side. Again, this is a love or hate. It's a bit like the helium escape valve on the Omega Seamaster. Some people love it, some people absolutely hate it. Personally, I think it makes a Panerai unmistakably a Panerai. Therefore, as a watch lover, I love it. It has a stainless steel bezel that plays wonderfully against that white dial. Like, seriously plays so well. I'm a huge fan of stainless steel bezels, and it also has a green rubber strap. I'm a really big fan of the green on this rubber strap, but I'm not a fan of the actual rubber strap itself. I'm not sure about the texture. That's just a personal preference thing, but you can always change your strap over to something else. This watch comes in at £8,600. I think the important thing when it comes to watches, especially when it comes to brands like Panerai, is trying them on before you commit or you buy. And there's a really weird thing happening at the moment where people are trying them on digitally online, and that doesn't work. It just doesn't look right. It doesn't work. It doesn't give you a true feeling of what the watches are like. And I feel like Panerai kind of lies in, it has a stigma around it about being too big. But when you try these big watches on, sometimes, a lot of the time, you think, damn, that's cool. And it just so happens that Chisholm Hunter are actually the official stockists of Panerai. So drop into your local Chisholm Hunter, try it on, see how it feels, and then make a decision. We're also stockists of a bunch of other brands, and I'd really appreciate you coming in, saying hi. Okay, so now we get to the interesting ones, because some of these are a little bit more vintage, a little bit more rare, and you're going to really like the couple that are coming up. This right here is the Tudor Prince Oyster Date, with the reference number 79280. It has a white dial, a stainless steel bezel, and looks rather like a Rolex Daytona, but it's not, because it's a Tudor. Now, interestingly enough, I actually made a predictions video around about 2 weeks ago, from when I'm recording this, and I actually said my prediction for Tudor is that they're going to release or re-release their Oyster Prince collection. And the reason being for that is in 2023, Tudor did a one-of-one watch for charity for one watch, and it was a Tudor Oyster Prince. And in this Tudor, they had their very own in-house movement, a brand new movement from Tudor. Now, it does not make sense to me that Tudor would create their brand new in-house movement to put into one singular watch. Financially, that doesn't make sense. They must be planning a release for this model. But that doesn't really explain why I would get this model, I suppose. I suppose that then led me down a rabbit hole of research while I was kind of in the researching for the predictions video. And since then, I've really fallen in love with this model in particular. This model comes in at 40mm in diameter, has a beautiful white dial, and the unique thing about this dial is the Tudor logo is actually at the right-hand side instead of the top. And it's kind of spun the sub-dials round a little bit, if that kind of makes sense. And those silvery sub-dials against that white dial, against the stainless steel bezel, just play wonderfully. Now, if you actually look at the crown on this watch, you'll notice that it actually has the Rolex crown instead of the Tudor logo. And this is how far back we're talking. I think the watch that I'm talking about at the moment, it's from 1996. And it just shows you how far Tudor have come in a relatively small space of time when you think of the luxury industry. Another added feature to this watch is when you actually open the clasp, you've got that stamp that Rolex normally do, that Tudor used to do, saying Tudor Watch Co. Limited. Now, obviously, you can't get this watch new because it is a vintage model, but if you were to get it on the pre-owned market, it'd be between £8,000 to £10,000, depending if you can get it with box and papers, condition, etc., etc. The next watch we're going to talk about is the AP Royal Oak, part of the Holy Trinity, and I've been obsessed with the AP Royal Oak ever since I did one of my first ever reviews on the Royal Oak. Back when I was young, had more hair, no wrinkles. It was a beautiful time, and it was a beautiful watch. And ever since then, I've kind of had this weird connection. There was 3 watches that I reviewed right at the start of the channel. One was a Langenzona. The next was an IWC Big Pilot, and the next was an AP Royal Oak. And the AP Royal Oak's probably the one that stood out to me as just undeniably awesome. Now, this model in particular comes in at 41mm in diameter, 10.5mm in thickness, and it has 50 meters of water resistance. The dial on this watch is mostly what attracted me. Now, typically, I'm a white dial guy. Everybody knows that. I've kind of have this, I mean, the Tudor Prince says it all, really. I am obsessed with white dials, but I thought for this one, I'd go for something a little bit different, a little bit more unique. And this is that little bit more unique. It's a khaki, dark, muted down green dial with that grand tapestry, iconic pattern that runs through most AP Royal Oaks. It is absolutely stunning. It has the caliber 4302 movement with 32 joules and 70 hours of power. And of course, this is totally self-winding. I just feel like in my watch journey, one day I want a Vacheron Constantin, probably a 222. I want the AP Royal Oak, probably this one or something similar. And maybe a Patek Nautilus, but to be honest, Patek, I'm not as bothered by Patek. I think those 2 watches are the ones that I've grown up being like, damn, if I get there, I've hit the peak. Not to mention all the history that goes into the AP Royal Oak, Gerald Genta, the iconic design. I really love everything that goes into the Royal Oak. I love the production. I love the look, the feel. It's just an awesome watch. And on the subject of Royal Oaks, the next watch is similar because it's similar 70s design, and it is the overseas section to my 222 debate. But the reason I've picked this is not for style, it's for substance. It's because of the movement inside this model. It's unbelievable. This is where I saw my inner kid, my inner watch-loving kid come out and looking at the cogs turning, the movements spinning, the winding the watch and seeing the spring bar tightening. Wow, this thing, it's unbelievable. This is the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Skeleton Tourbillon model. It comes in at 42 millimeters in full titanium, and look at that movement. Look at it. That is unbelievable. Now, bear in mind, this watch only comes in at 10.39 millimeters in thickness, and that movement is shoved in to that. This is why I love watchmaking. I seriously do. It's seeing how all those pieces fit together to make something so beautiful that all speaks the same language, communicates with each other, and powers your watch. It's seriously stunning. And I found myself really excited about watches again when I had this in my hands. The movement in this model is the caliber 6000V/210T-B935. It's entirely self-winding, it's automatic, it has that tourbillon in the front, which is unbelievable, and it has 3 days of power reserve. Now, it actually doesn't put the price on the website of this watch, but I'm pretty sure it goes for around about 100K, so, I mean, we can all dream. The next watch on the list is the Breitling Chronomat GMT, the blue dial with that platinum bezel, and it's stainless steel with a black rubber strap. It has a light blue face, comes in at 40 millimeters in diameter, 11.77 millimeters in thickness, and has an approximate power reserve of 42 hours. Now, the story behind this one is an interesting one. I had an interview on the Into the Mind podcast with a gentleman called Duhan van der Merwe. This definitely will not age well. I really hope we win in the rugby against England because we got destroyed by Ireland. But anyway, I was very nervous for this interview, this podcast episode. It was a very big guest to me. And before the interview, or before the podcast, my brother said, listen, you'll be fine. Just do what you do best. Sit there and chat to him about life, chat to him about rugby, because you love rugby. It doesn't really matter. And he gave me his Breitling, which happened to be this version. And that moment really meant a lot to me. It might not have meant a lot to him. I'm sure he didn't even realize what he was doing, but to me, that was a significant moment. And ever since then, I've had an emotional attachment to that watch because of the support that my brother gave me. And I think watches are about memories at the end of the day. They're about what you connect to your watch. And to have that connection between my brother and the support and the love from my brother, it meant a lot. And this watch, forever now, will be the Breitling I would get. And finally, and most excitingly, we have the Omega Great White. Not this Omega Great White, because people seem to call this the Omega Great White. This I would call the king. But the Omega Great White, the OG Omega Great White. This watch comes in at 41 millimeters in diameter, comes in full stainless steel, has a white dial, beautiful flares of red on it, which is just unbelievable. It has the closer wave pattern that we see in other Omega Seamasters, but not this one. A beautiful stainless steel bezel with big, black, bold numerals. And it has the Omega caliber 1128 with 44 hours of power. And I'm so upset that they discontinued this watch. It's kind of unbelievable to me. I understand that they need to upgrade and innovate, but I do think that I would love to see them bring this watch back. To me, this is the GOAT. This is the daddy of the Seamaster range. This was actually the first Omega I ever owned, and I sold it. Stupidly, I sold it, and it remains my biggest watch journey regret. Like, seriously, I should not have done it. It was stupid. I needed money at the time, but after I sold it, I thought, damn, I'm never going to get that watch back. Now, to top off, the Omega Great White began to be produced in the year 2000. Now, if I were to get this, I would get a year 2000 Great White because it's actually the date that my sister was born. So I would like that, again, emotional connection. Watches, at the end of the day, guys, are subjective. And I think what's really important at the end of the day, guys, is the emotional attachment that you have to your timepiece. If it represents your mum, your dad, a special moment in time, it makes it that much sweeter. And it means that you'll never be able to sell that watch because no amount of money can buy the attachment you have to that piece. And that's partly why I love the watch industry. But on that note, guys, I know that emotional attachments mean so much to us when it comes to the watch industry, and I'd love to hear your emotional attachments when it comes to watches. Is there any stories about the watches that are on your wrist right now? Drop them in the comments. I love reading these comments. I reply to as many of them as I can, and I'd be really interested to hear them, so drop them below. Thank you guys so much for watching this Chisholm Hunter video. Do remember to subscribe if you do enjoy it. It helps me more than you know. Or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches, or my Instagram at HP Lifelens, or our podcast, the Into the Mind podcast, if you want to check out that rugby interview. And that's pretty much all from me. I'll see you soon.